Welcome. As Nick said, my name is Eberle, and I have the privilege of serving as Division Administrator of Intergovernmental Relations, as well as the pleasure of working with Mike, Peter, and David, my staff, as well as Secretary Steph, well known to many of you. It's a pleasure to be with all of you. I know the association has been very supportive and continues to be supportive of the efforts of the Land Information Program at DOA. I'd like to touch on two items today as it relates to Governor Walker's Budget Act 20 modernization of grant funding, as well as building a statewide parcel map. But before I get into those 2 points, I just want to touch briefly on how we came to this point. As many of you are familiar, Wisconsin has had a great history and as a leader in the early 90s with this type of technology. But obviously through the years, through funding, state agencies that haven't always kept up, so to a certain extent, we've fallen behind. But as luck would have it, in 2010, 2011, Dr. James Kroll, who I know spoke to many of you at last year's conference, been commissioned to study the deer population in Wisconsin. And as part of his background, he was very familiar with geospatial and the importance that can have, not just in determining biological needs, but in every other facet of state government and society, as many of you are aware. So with that, as part of his recommendation, the silver lining was, look, we know what this can do. We have the skill set in Wisconsin. We have the knowledge and the commitment from many of you in the groups. What we need to do is make a serious commitment to move forward, not just with funding, but a commitment from those in state government to make Wisconsin once again a leader in this type of technology. So to that end, Act 20 went about doing that in 2 ways. One, through many of your efforts in the state legislature, we received a directive that, listen, if you're going to fund this, you need to keep funding it and keep a dedicated source. And to that end, realize that many of the grants the counties received have not kept up, and with some counties with greater need. So that's now been increased from $50,000 to $100,000. And in addition, with the education grants, from $300 to $1,000, and more importantly, listening to the local governments and how they do their budgeting to move up our timeline for the grant information application process. So the 2014 grants went out on October 1st of last year in trying to help the local governments meeting their budgetary needs. So that's one way, non-monetary, that we need to work with our customers, our clients, who are the local governments, state agencies, and organizations that help produce some key information with that. Secondly, obviously with the grant funding, that's a work in progress, but we now have a dedicated source of funding which will continue to grow. It was increased by $500,000 in 2014, and we're expecting that in 2015 when we get the full funding coming through as of January 1st, that should increase to $2.2 million. And in turn, what that's going to help us do in the Land Information Program is work individually with counties and their needs to ensure that the funding is there for this specific purpose. So it's kind of how we got to this point. The message has been heard by Department of Administration and the rest of the state government that this needs to get done, it needs to be done consistently, and we are to continue to move forward with your help in those efforts. Secondly, some of the items we're working on now to build that parcel map as we move forward. It's about a 2-year timeline. One encouraging item we have now is working on the broadband parcel mapping project with Public Service Commission, Land Information Program, and State Cartographer's Office. And what we're finding with that is that we're getting good participation from the counties in the data that they're able to provide. And at the end of the day, our system here is only as good as the information that we receive from the counties, but in turn recognizing that all of you, the association who work in this field, you need our commitment and support, and we plan on doing that as we move forward, not only funding, but looking at the specific needs of where counties are at the current time and what some of their needs are going to be in the future, and working with them one-on-one together to build the right information, but then more importantly, making sure the proper amount of funding is there for them as well. So that's part of what's going on right now internally. We are, at this particular juncture, working with external partners on information. One example is the Department of Revenue and information they collect. So we already have some data that's ready made available, and we'll continue to move forward on our business plan. That's what's going on internally. Make no mistake about it, we are interested in, and we need your ideas and your help and your support as we move this forward. So the nice part of this is we have quite a bit of knowledge out there, but we want to make sure we're sharing that with everyone in real time so we can have a check on ourselves as we build this parcel map together. The way I see it is we have one check to get this right as we move forward. The good news is, moving forward, we have the revenue, the right staff, and the dedication of the organizations to do that. So as we look ahead in the next year or so, what are some of the things we want to accomplish? We want to build a plan that actually has some tangible results so you can see how a parcel map will look and get a product out there for people to review and give their feedback on. One start, as I mentioned, is the parcel mapping project from the PSC has put us the right step forward in doing that. Secondly, what we want to look at is how we go about data sharing with other state agencies and then format for a parcel map for later. And most importantly, what are we going to do as we move forward with that information with the individual counties as far as first, assessing the individual needs of each county. Secondly, formatting a plan to achieve the results that need to be finished for each particular county. So as we move forward, we're going to be looking to all of you for your engagement, your ideas, and your support. I ask for a little bit of patience as we build our plan internally, the business plan, but please know that that information will be shared as soon as possible in real time with everyone. In closing, I just want to say this is a very exciting time. Obviously, there's a lot to get done, but we're even more excited how this is going to look when it's all finished. So that's a small snapshot of where we're at, more importantly, where we're looking to go. Now, with that, I'm going to turn it over to David who can explain how we're going to do all that.
My name is David Cagigal, the Division Administrator for Enterprise Technology and also the state's Chief Information Officer. Ed, you didn't go too far, right? Right there. So after I finish, I'm going to bring them back up because I think there's some questions that you may want to ask Ed or myself. I'm not going to talk very long, but just highlight some of the areas that we all share in common, both at the state level and the county level. And we can't forget that because while the state organizations sit in the room and try to devise the solutions, we leave out a significant piece of this effort at the county level, and maybe even some of the cities as they get engaged with us. So this is an opportunity for all of us to get in the room and remind ourselves that that's a critical success factor for us to be able to do what we need to do together. That's the operative word, together. So as I segue from what Ed said, if we try to do everything that we'd like to do, we should be looking at governance first and foremost. What are the rules of the road? What are the bounding statutes that keep us from doing what we need to do? Why are we not accomplishing much? I was here last year. I think we were in Lake Geneva. Is that correct? Was that the last annual conference? So I was there, and you might want to ask a rhetorical question. How much have we accomplished last year to this year? Have we really moved the needle? Have we really accomplished a number of the things that we all set out to do last year? How much progress has been made? It'd be nice if we had a measurement scale so that we can convince ourselves that we are headed in the right direction, we are working together, we're doing the kinds of things that we expect of the state of Wisconsin to be able to do the things that are related to GIS and all the geographical information systems that we have available to us. So talking about governance and SAGIC, Lisa's here, and are you going to speak later to the purpose and value of SAGIC?
Not that I know of, but I can.
So just to give you the highlights, SAGIC has been around for a number of years. Is that correct, Lisa?
Yes.
Yes. And some of you are very familiar with SAGE. But just this year, or was it late last year, that we authorized the management cabinet of the state, made up of many, many departments, significant departments, authorizing the charter SAGE to get after their business and to do a number of things that heretofore have been voluntary representation of various people that have attended these meetings. So now Lisa's the chair, and she has representation from those national cabinet members to address these issues. And I'm going to highlight a few of them, and Lisa can remind me if I've missed any of them. But again, this is a state's organization. There is the Land Information Officers Network at the county level. There are technical committees associated with WLIA that should also be brought into the governance spirit. So for us to do it all by ourselves at the state level is not going to be a recipe for success. So governance is a place to start and begin to create that umbrella, if you will, of control, of direction, of strategy of what we're attempting to do, again, together. So SAGEC is going to be a significant part of leading the way for other partners representing other parts of the state. Should I say anything more about that, Lisa?
I mean, the issues that, and no one who knows me will be surprised that the main issues we're dealing with are data sharing and governance and identifying an inventory of our data. Right now, we don't even have a statewide inventory of what exists, so state agencies are really hammering on that this year for amongst ourselves, trying to figure out what the state agencies have. So we realize we need to get our house in order among the state agencies as well. So.
Yeah. So let me drill down a little bit deeper to exactly what Lisa had said. Portal access, the front door, entry into the repositories. DET would be happy to set that up with our resources. And give you a little bit of background on the Division of Enterprise Technology. We recently completed here in the month of January last month the aggregation of all the major data centers into one facility at Fenright Road, our data center that exists there. Large facility. We are now the one and only place in which all the hardware, the storage, the servers, the network equipment is sitting there. And we house a lot of the GIS information among many of the servers. We also are implementing an ERP system, an Enterprise Resource Planning System called STAR. Some of you are familiar with that. Again, centralizing and displacing 120 systems that have been operating over the last 20 to 30 years, creating a legacy of the future with one instance that will do a number of things for finance, procurement, HR, and budget. Again, enterprise. We couldn't do these things unless we adopted standards and a willingness to share. So I'm using that as a euphemism for you to understand that this can be done. And we have the leadership, we have the facility, we have the resources, we have the technology to be able to do this. And as if you remember last year when I spoke to you, this is not a technology issue that we're dealing with. Largely the people wanting to share and the desire to meet the challenges of the state of Wisconsin and to be able to get this done. So the governance piece will help us frame those issues for us, identify the challenges such as data sharing. Chris Diller and I are working together with the DMA on emergency issues. Shame on Wisconsin, shame on us, shame on me. If we're in a catastrophe, we cannot get the data that we need at an instant that we need it. And we're working through the issues that may prevent us from doing that. Chris and I are going to work very closely with the Homeland Security Council, which I'm a member of, and making sure that there will be no obstacles in Wisconsin Dells if there was ever a flood, northern Wisconsin if there's another fire. If anything happens in Milwaukee or Madison or any of the major cities or even your small town communities, that we instantaneously have the information that we need for first responders to respond to the catastrophe that may occur. Data sharing is something that we are talking about, and if you look at the portal repository, the front door, and the repositories thereafter, the inventories that would exist in that portal, I guess you would begin to realize that existed and had an inventory of all the databases that are associated with GIS you're more than halfway there. But it's like the front door to an empty house if there's nothing in there. So we have to make sure that we're willing to understand the value and the presence of information behind that portal and those inventories. As we look at those inventories, we have to understand that many of the challenges that we're looking at is the data sharing that we spoke to, the standards of how everything will be situated or stored. So if I get past the issue with you, data sharing, everybody says, yes, I will share your data. What am I going to get? I'm going to get many flavors, many colors, many formats, many instances. So the standardization quickly raises its head. And as I said, as we try to look at enterprise solutions across the state, we start with a diversity of thought and a diversity of history that needs to come into a common format and a common understanding. Ed spoke to that a little bit in parcel mapping. Today, as we speak, is there one way to represent a parcel? I don't think so. I think there's a need to go ahead and adopt standards around parcel mapping. So as we look at the data sharing and the standardization, we look across integration and making sure we can go from here to here to here to here. The ERP system that I spoke of earlier, we will for the first time have one procurement system. We will for the first time be compliant in that if we're going to buy office supplies, we will buy from a contract that's been orchestrated centrally. And we'll buy from one place online. And we'll know everyone who did not. And so we'll go through a compliance cycle. So that feedback in terms of our wishes and desires to be very effective with taxpayer money on procurement will have that kind of closed loop understanding and feedback. The same thing goes with this situation. We'll begin to understand where the standardizations are, and if we get to the 90%, we focus on the 10. And we explain to them again and again and again the value of standardization, so that we have an adequate way of transcending all of the repositories of information. I'm trying to make that as easy for you to understand in layman terms as I can. If you recall in history the Tower of Babel, if everybody's speaking a different language, how well can you communicate? And so when you get down to the information technology or the technology that we have available to us, that would be the easy part for us to do that. The hard part is for the people willing to participate and to share the data. So as we look at, and this comes to mind just Monday, recall from WDDC. If you want to go out to his site, look at the annual report, he's got a map there. Pete Norman, using Esri, has created the map by county. You can drill into the county. You can look at the number of companies in the county, the demographics of population. What I suggested to read is to also overlay the broadband in our entire network. And that would be very interesting to understand where we are serving the rural counties adequately and, more importantly, inadequately. So that would be able to have us invest in bringing that broadband service, internet access to every school in the state of Wisconsin, every student K through 12 being given the opportunities that Madison or Dane County or Milwaukee County have afforded to two large populations. So you see the value of trying to address these challenges, and I'm confident that we can do this together. I'll leave you with this, that DET continues to look and support ESRI tools, but there's also a need for PIN mapping. And as you look at these kind of tools, you selectively decide where you want to apply them. The large ESRI tools or the simple one-dimensional PIN mapping tool. Your choice. We will support a variety of tools to be able to do that. We'll host a variety of inventories, hopefully in a standardized way. And hopefully you're all willing to share your data and to be able to give us what you need so that you can enter through the portal and be able to access in a more convenient way or in an emergency event that we have to share. Might call it up here. I don't have anything else to say. I'm certainly willing to take some questions from you and so on. You want any clarifications about what Ed said or what I said?
I have a question on your parcel layer that you're developing with the Public Service Commission. Since the Public Service Commission is somewhat public-private, is that going to be proprietary, or is that database that you guys are working on going to be shared with other state agencies and the public in the future, or is there going to be a duplicate effort?
No, that's a great question. Will that information be shared? And the answer is yes. One thing we're trying to do is in working with that model, use it as a stepping stone, if you will. Obviously, it's a need for the PSC with county parcel mapping and building their county address system, but taking lessons learned and using that as we move forward so we don't duplicate efforts. And in addition, that information will be made public. And one of the things we want to do in building the parcel map is learn by doing, make sure we get something out there in a tangible form soon so all of you can see and react to it as well. If that answers your question. Obviously, David and I will be available afterwards if anyone would like to talk with us. But with that, it's been a pleasure to be here this morning talking with all of you, and we look forward to continuing to work with you. Thank you.